afternoon, everyone. So I'm Royce Aguilar. I'm part of the research team of First Metro Securities. So this is another monthly wrap up. Of course, meron pang we have one more market day. This recording, for those who will listen to Spotify, this recording is as of April 28th, right? And of course, we understand that we have one more market day tomorrow, right? But it's clear as day in terms of the performance of the market for this month. Okay, so we will discuss what happened, what to watch out for in May, right? And then we'll reiterate our long-term picks. We'll show you one trader's playbook that we like right now, and then we'll go with the question and answer portion. All right. So let's get started. So what happened in the month of April? So month to date, no, si PSCI ended lower by 313 points. We're actually down by 4%. We are at 6,909 as of April 28th market close. Year to date, the PSCI is down by 3%. Okay, so usually in our segment, there's this what dragged the market, what supported the market. But this time around, it seems like there's no support. It's more of drag, and it's a couple of things really. Fear of more aggressive rate hikes by central banks, especially CUS, and then higher global inflation. It's actually triggered by higher global inflation. Prior to the Ukraine invasion, inflation was already at an uptrend, given the reopening, the pent-up demand, and then right now it was triggered by the Ukraine war, given that I think they account for quarter of wheat production. And then there's this fun fact that I saw na 12% of calories globally, Ukraine, Russia daw galing in terms of production. So there's this really big impact in terms of current events to inflation, triggering a more aggressive central bank. Aggressive meaning more higher interest rates, which is not good for equities, right? So in terms of price action, definitely the 7,000 level was broken. If you notice naman, if you take a look at the price action, the 7,000 level wasn't acting already as a key or as a strong resistance or support already, right? The market was hovering above, hovering below 7,000, right? So that said, parang soft na yung base. That's why it easily got broken down. And looking at right now, it's not only that. No, if you take a look at the price action, for those listening to Spotify, at least you can do it your own chart. The PSA right now is not only below 7,000 levels, below the 200-day MA. That's the long-term moving average, and it's not a good signal if the market is trading below that 200-day MA. And then to add to that, the previous support levels, which are the 50-day, the 100-day MA, right, which acted as support before, right now it's acting as resistance, diba? So may role reversal, this is the type of role reversal in technical analysis which is not favorable. Usually we want to be breaking above resistance. Now it's breaking below support levels, right? So this suggests that the bears are in control. Okay, so in terms of the trading plan that we mentioned, just continue setting stop limit orders. That's a good thing about our platform. You can set stop limit orders. If you're tracking the index via FM ETF, you just base from the 7,000 level. The next support levels are 6866. Acting as a support so far, but the key thing here is the market is on a bearish movement, right? So you must trade cautiously, assuming you really want to base your investment style with technical analysis. So what do you watch out for in the May? Definitely a lot of things to watch out for in May. Diba, may forecast right now yung si Department of Health or the Health Organization, even si Octa forecasting higher COVID-19 cases next month. Will that occur? It's easy to just get lost in the headlines, but if you really read the news, yung sinasabi dun is what's being said there is that once the new Omicron variant, which actually unfortunately we just heard yesterday, diba po, there's this first case of this new Omicron variant in Baguio, diba, which came from Finland, I believe, in the first days of April, right? Tapos I just looked at the news earlier, it had 44 close contacts. So let's see of course, we hope for the best, but we must be prepared for the worst. Okay, so will that occur? Yung 10,000 daily cases daw and then 100,000 active cases by the end of May. So let's see. So definitely to watch out for. We're not out of the woods in terms of COVID-19. I hope we're all clear about that. And in terms of economic data, lots of economic data as always, especially inflation. We must always be on inflation watch in the coming months. Besides that, in the US, I think this is one of the more important central bank meetings because are they gonna raise rates by 25 bips or 50 bips? If it's 50 bips, that's the fear that the market is take into account, the more aggressive rate hikes, right? So you see there in the US, it's May 5th. For the Philippines, there's this central bank interest rate decision May 19th. We're hearing or indicating, or the BSP chief is signaling that it could raise rates in June. So maybe they're going to keep rates for now. Something to look forward to is in June. But again, what you must look out for is the US. It's May 5th. Right? So after the May 4th, diba? May 5th, diba? May the 4th be with you. Now it's May 5th. Something to watch out for. That could trickle down in global markets definitely. Okay? So in terms of global data, inflation in China, right? And manufacturing data on Monday. Okay? So of course, elections on May 9th. Diba? Sino ang magiging next president and vice president of the Philippines? Definitely something to take into account. Okay, what will the market do? That, I mean, keep in mind, just to reiterate, we still have days left before the elections, but we would just like to reiterate that right now, I think we mentioned this before, right? Or at least in my TV interviews, we mentioned this is the time to not be full aggressive. Right, you want to have cash at this point to really buy the dip. Okay, so of course this is long-term speaking. If you're an intermediate term trader, short-term trader, again we have different reports that could cater to you. But if you're long-term, the strategy here is to have enough cash to buy the dips because we expect more volatility from here. Ukraine-Russia developments still ongoing, and it could have direct impact further in commodity prices and global inflation. And then corporate earnings for the first quarter, it's underway. Okay, so let's please take a look at our daily reports for our earnings write-ups. So in terms of our stock picks, for those who have been listening in this wrap-up, again, we have no changes in our stock picks. Our target price remain the same as compared to last month. But we have to tell you that we are on the verge of changing our year-end index target. Initially, it was around 8.6, right? Maybe it's around that level. But right now, we're shifting to a more conservative view. There's upside, definitely. That's why I still put the stock picks here. But the key takeaway here is, of course, once we downgrade our year-end index target, which I believe it could be done within the next 2 weeks, consequently, the target price of our stock picks will be downgraded also, or at least lower. But keep in mind, I can tell you right now that the picks I will tell you will still remain to be our top picks. It's just that the target price will be a bit lower. Okay, so I think at this point, the target price that you will see on the slide, you can disregard a bit. But the bottom line here is the picks that I will mention are still our picks, despite the downgrade. Okay, so next slide. So Jollibee, right? For Jollibee, the key takeaway here is it's a reopening play. The aggressive expansion, both local and overseas, will bode well for the company. Especially, we are seeing the reopening already. If you ask us 3 years ago, we didn't like Jollibee, but right now we're seeing a path to profitability for Smash Burger, Coffee Bean, right? So that's why we like Jollibee. For Robinsons Retail, it's a mall reopening play. We're seeing a lot of people go to malls, pre-pandemic levels. Definitely, we are seeing other companies project pre-pandemic levels as early as the latter part of this year in terms of mall traffic, and that should bode well for companies like RHI, especially for RHI, the convenience stores, specialty stores, mga department stores, mostly inside the malls. So that's RHI. Then for SM Investments, definitely it's still our top pick, given that it has this exposure to sectors that we like. Diba? Si retail, real estate, and banks, top one si SM dyan. So we continue to like the company. Right now, in terms of share price, it's still being, for most of March and April, the share price of SM got dragged by its removal from the FTSE indices, FTSE. It's a global benchmark. It's just like MSCI, but FTSE is like a smaller, less impactful type of benchmark in terms of its impact to the share price. But nevertheless, for SM, it strangely got removed. I think we disagree a bit on that, but the bottom line here is that provided the stock some further discount, something to take advantage of again for long-term investors. For property, Ayala Land, it's the same case, no? In terms of our thesis for the property names, it's almost the same. It's just that we prefer the bigger names, mainly because they have faced several crises and they have maintained their market leadership throughout the way. So we pick Ayala Land, our SMPH, and RLC. Okay, so there. And then for financial sector, this is something to consider. Definitely, especially we are poised for a higher interest rate environment, and banks will benefit from that kasi higher margins. So again, the same way we like property, the bigger property names, we like the bigger bank names. We just like to disclose na si Metrobank. We don't cover Metrobank since we're part of the group, but we have a research partner, DBS, Development Bank of Singapore, that covers Metrobank for us. Their target price is 68. But the bottom line here is, yeah, the financial sector is something to definitely put on your watch list, or if you don't have yet on your portfolio, something to consider. Again, we like the bigger names, BPI, BDO, Metrobank, SecB. Okay, for BPI lang, I would just like to reiterate, or just like to emphasize, management expectations of loan growth of 8 to 10% as of first quarter earnings. The loan growth is around 7%. So let's see, no, as the economy further reopens this year, maybe they could reach the 8 to 10% target. So yeah, BDO is also our one of our top picks. Security Bank also. For Security Bank lang, we just like to reiterate that the upside will come from the rebound in retail banking, which there are higher margins, right? So yeah, those are our top picks. We have 9 as of the moment. In terms of picks, this is the share price as of April 28th. Again, for those listening Spotify, just to reiterate, the upside as of April 28th for SM, it's 47%. For Ali, it's 45%. For SMP, it's 32%. RLC 51, GFC 30%, RHI 51, BDO 38, BPI 14, SecB 42%. So huge upside again for long term, but we have to take into account na, or we have to reiterate that it's not the time to be full aggressive. You must have a bit of cash to save for a rainy day. Okay, this is our model report so far, performance of our top picks since the start of the year, right? That's as of April 28th. In terms of if market cap weighted return, outperforming sa PSI, but if equal weight meaning if you bought all of our picks equally, kunyari tig to 10,000 pesos, it's almost the same performance as PSI. In terms of traders playbook, we like to show you one stock na surprisingly, both on the fundamental and technical analysis perspective, has been really outperforming. For ICT, of course, they're cautiously optimistic in terms of the Ukraine-Russia war, but they did mention also na they have remained committed to their cost reduction initiatives, and their one of their priorities to maintain their EBITDA margin. So EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. It's something companies and analysts look in terms of analysis, no? And it has been outstanding in terms of margins for ICT, and they plan to maintain that way. In terms of price action naman, one of the few names na trading above 1500 DMA. So it's definitely a buy on pullback strategy. That's the optimal strategy. It's easy. If you're trading ICTSI, if mag-break siya 50-day, 100-day, you can sell. Diba? That's the purpose now of our stop limit. We have several features that could help you in terms of your risk management. Okay? And then for Traders Playbook, as of the first trimester of the year, 61% hit ratio. We're hoping to improve that. We're always at around 70%. We are confident that we'll reach that by the end of the year. Key takeaways, diba? Stick with your opening winners, preferably property financials. Be ready to take profit on stocks that have rallied significantly and have at least 25% cash, diba? To manage risk since there's still global market volatility. And then, of course, we besides these types of webinars, even yung mga basic stock market webinars namin, we also have podcasts which we interview experts, diba? We interview not only experts, we interview the top management. Earlier this month, we interviewed Alvin Lau, the president CEO of DNL Industries, diba? We always hear DNL about what's the company all about, what's their business model. Please listen to our podcast. Okay, so there. All right, so let's try to answer your question. So again, no, as we answer the first set of questions, again, you can follow up or feel free lang to type sa Q&A box. First question, ang stab fund ba na tinatawag yun yung pinagtatapal sa IPO price para hindi siya mahulog or it doesn't fall? Let's say 1 peso yung IPO price with stab fund, so nandun ba yung stab fund? Well, in terms of stab fund, no, first of all, it helps, especially for the first set of days, weeks of the listing date. But definitely not all companies listing in the Philippine Stock Exchange has stab fund. Okay? Of course, not necessarily if may stab fund. If there's stab fund, meaning good IPO na siya. Again, we always based on the fundamentals. If IPO, no, company based. But yeah, to answer your question, there's this stabilizing agent. Then they are the ones that setting up the stab fund. And usually they, yung strategy there is they put the stab fund, the buying, that buying fund is set up. Usually it's IPO price, diba? If it breaks below the IPO price, usually the stab fund also helps cushion the losses, like within 3 to 5% below IPO price. Yeah, so I hope I answered your question. Will REITs price be affected by the interest rate increase in June? Well, if you ask me, in the stock market is a forward-looking mechanism, and if you ask me, I think that's already been partially priced in. You can see the underperformance of the REITs for the past few weeks. But if you ask me, I think this is the time you separate in terms of REITs. This is where the men separate the boys from the men, diba? Kasi if you ask us, mostly we prefer the bigger REITs, mainly sina M-REIT, A-REIT, RCR, mainly because they have that certain upside in terms of value. How are they going to increase their value? If they infuse some assets, and that's the plan. That's the plan for these REITs, diba? They have been transparent that they will infuse assets to the REITs. So if you want to save to keep, or you want to invest sa mga dividend paying names sa REITs, we suggest to stick with the bigger ones, because there's going to be a lot of growth via infusion in those type of names, and in terms of stability in earnings, you can always expect that from the bigger companies, diba? Of course, barring any recession scenarios, usually stable growth yung mga bigger companies. Yeah, so I hope I answered your question. Okay. Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you. No, didn't you have FB before in the topics? Yes, that's correct. No, but right now we're evaluating. Please, everyone listen. Please, we're now evaluating in terms of FB given the rise in cost, diba? So we will be gladly to put it back once after our evaluation. Na it's still topic worthy, but right now we opt to remove it first. As we further evaluate the stock and its the impact of the inflationary effect to its earnings. Okay, so this good question. No? What company should we invest now if you want to invest in a short period of time? Well, I cannot pinpoint those stocks, but I can tell you that in terms of short period of time kasi that's where technical analysis comes in, and we have reports dedicated to that, like Taylor's playbook, right? We also have scans technical events, which we upload daily. So please take a look at our platform, First MetroSec platform, for those types of recommendations. We always upload mga 3 to 4 times a week yan. Yung Traders Playbook, scans, technical events, that's daily. Those will that will answer your question in terms of which companies to invest in a short period of time. So I hope that helps. I hope you have an account para ma-answer rin yung question. Another good question. With the PSI looking bearish, how best should we prepare or handle our current stocks? Yeah, that's why I mentioned kanina that you should have at least 25% cash. You should stick with the bigger names because usually, I'm not saying pag bumaba yung market, hindi bababa yung bigger names. Of course, the bigger names will also drop. But in terms of the percentage drop, it's significantly less as compared to the second liner names. Right? So, I'm not saying you should have 100%, 90%, 80% exposure. You could have as little as 50% exposure as we speak, right? But you must have this mindset na your cash will be used to buy the dip instead of, setting it aside to other assets, right? I think this is the time nang you prepare your cash, because we're not telling you to hold your cash for a long time. It's just that there are events right now na upcoming that might result in a more market volatility. Okay, so we must be prepared, and one way to prepare is to have cash with the mindset of buying once volatility lessens. So there, I think at this point, it's cash is king, right? So don't be fully aggressive right now and just pray na nothing will happen, because the volatility is high and we recognize that. Another good question. At this point in time, would an actively managed fund be a better option than individual stocks? Well, I cannot recommend a specific fund, right? But kasi just doing the numbers, since our recommendation is mostly to buy the bigger names, which can be found mostly in index names, I think buying an ETF, which is, of course, it's factual naman na it's cheaper than mutual funds, right? You can buy ETF, and then you can buy a bit of the property financials that we were talking about earlier. But if you're not that comfortable given what we caution of global market volatility, you can buy the ETF first, and then again, as mentioned, you should have a bit of cash. So I hope I answered your question. Please let me know. Please follow up if it's not clear. Another good question. Aside from dividend yield, what are the other parameters to consider when investing in REITs? Besides the dividend, definitely there are a lot of things to consider besides dividend yield. Number one, who is the sponsor? Meaning, diba, for example, A-REIT, who is the sponsor? Kasi Ayala Land. Who's the parent? Ayala Land, Mega World, Robinos Land, sila yung mga parent. That's one. Second, how much? Usually naman kasi, what's the growth? What's the growth prospect? How do you measure growth prospect? Usually, when a REIT list, not all of its assets are part of the REIT. The parent company usually evaluates before infusing the said asset to the REIT. So one way to evaluate is how much infusion will happen, because that directly results in the increase in value of the REIT. Diba? So that's another thing to consider. Third, which sector is it exposed at? Diba? Right now, hindi lang property, kasi for C-REIT, you have solar. So you have to also consider that. Which sector is it exposed to? Diba? So that's just some of the few things to consider besides dividend yield. Diba? So definitely, guys, hindi pag REITs, hindi lang dividend yield. Okay? The growth is always important. Kasi if wala siyang growth, how could it provide you with stable dividend yield, diba? Yun. This is a good question also, since it was mentioned earlier on how Russian war affected the market. Considering the performance trend of the mining oil sector, would you still recommend for us beginners investing in one of those sectors? Actually, guys, unfortunately, or well, like I think we mentioned this several times na there's always a bull market somewhere, and the bull market right now is in commodities because of the Ukraine invasion, diba? So right now, of course, if umakyat yung mga commodity prices, for example, sa Semirara, umakyat yung coal, benefits Semirara because it can now sell its coal at higher prices, di ba? Umakit yung nickel prices, kaya umakit yung si Nickel Asia, si Global Ferronickel. So the question now is, would you recommend us beginners to invest in one of those sector? I think a buy on pullbacks on these commodities is something to consider, right? Like we said, no, we're not out of the woods yet. No signs of progress for the Ukraine invasion. You can actually say na as of right now, given that situation, pwede pa nga maging hedge yung commodities. Right? So sadly, umakit yung coal, syempre akit rin yung energy, kaya tumataas yung kuryente, minsan tumataas yung gas prices. So how do you play that in terms of investment? Actually, that's by investing in commodities. How do you invest in commodities? Now you dissect, diba? Si Semirara Coal, nickel Asia, nickel, global ferronickel, nickel. Sino pa? Copper, AT, si Atlas. Diba? So something to consider. We have previous playbook reports for those, so please also take into consideration or take some time in reading those para mas elaborate yung explanation. Okay, but I hope I answered your question. To answer your question, something to consider even for beginners, right? Of course, for long-term investors, we still prefer the top picks that we mentioned earlier. But if you want to dip your toes into other sectors, mining and oil is something to consider. And for more elaborate explanation, please take a look at our traders playbook reports. Another question is how would you rate Converge in long-term investment? It is possible to compare in big names company? Yeah, no doubt about it. Based from the numbers alone, Converge, huge growth prospect, right? Poised for double-digit earnings growth. The thing here is, we actually have a target price of 41 for Converge, right? So we have a buy call. But for now, given the global market volatility, we prefer to stick with the battered names. Kasi for example, for Converge, you notice it went as high as 41. Si AC Energy also, diba, went as high as 13, or if I'm not mistaken. And this year, they have been sold off significantly. Kasi pag tumataas yung interest rates, what happens is the more expensive stocks get sold off, right? Because they get more expensive. That's the mindset there. So right now, Converge is still relatively expensive, but in our view, there's still upside. But given the global market volatility, it's not something you should prioritize as of now. But definitely, we could go back to that once the dust settles, right? And one key event kasi na short term that we're watching is elections, right? And probably after elections, there's some clarity in terms of the winner and their platforms. If malinaw naman, the market will appreciate that. Diba? Clarity. What the market wants is clarity. Kasi pag uncertainty, the market never likes uncertainty. Okay? There. Okay, so since we cannot predict how low will a stock price drop, how do we buy the dip? Now, this is where technical analysis comes into play, because technical analysis will tell you where are the next support levels, right? If you're a long-term investor, you want to stick with long-term investing, you want to stick with fundamentals, buying the dip simply means na if you can stomach the drop tapos gusto mo pa bumili, you buy. But if you want to put technical analysis into your arsenal, into your investment strategy, that's where support levels come into play. Okay, so with the support levels, you can find that sa mga weekly reports namin. In all of our reports in terms of stocks, we try to write in all of the companies na mataas yung volume as much as we can, and we always tell there ano yung next support levels, and the next support levels will tell you na those are the dips that you can buy into. Okay, so I hope that's clear. So yeah, another question disregarding the podcast. With your talk with Mr. Luis of SPNEC, would you recommend to buy SPNEC? Something to consider definitely for investors with risk appetite. Okay, kasi definitely si SPNEC has a lot of potential, right? Solar Philippines alone has proven a lot naman. For SPNEC kasi it's hard to look at SPNEC alone. For SPNEC alone kasi it was built initially for the Nueva Ecija solar plant, right? But right now it's the plan there is around 10 gigawatts of projects, diba? With of course partnerships with the bigger energy companies. So now what we're looking forward to is how they will execute that. So they're in the verge of that. They're in the verge of executing those plans. So for growth investors, definitely something to watch out. Something to put in your watch list, or you can put a little money into it, but not to be totally aggressive. for now. Kasi, like I mentioned with the Converge example earlier, yung mga expensive names on a higher interest rate environment, binibentahan yan. Right? And SPNEC alone hasn't earned pa naman. So, and with the market cap, it's classified as expensive. Right? But as mentioned, the growth prospects are there. So, something to consider. This is a good question. Is there any suggested time frame to get out of the position if there's not much movement and even though sell signals are not yet hit? Well, for example, if you have 1 million pesos, right? Well, you have 1 million pesos, let's say you have 500,000 allocated in each of the two stocks you have. Si stock 1, okay, performing well. Si stock 2, ito na yung example. This is your example. There's not much movement and there's no sell signals yet. But once you do a bit of research, you found a better stock. In your view, you found a better stock na tingin mo mas gagalaw on the upside. That's the time you sell. That's the time you sell the stock with not much movement. Okay, so the sell signals, even though the sell signals are not yet, you can shift to another stock because the view there in the other stock is there's a higher upside, there's more movement. So no shame naman in selling. Selling is a strategy. Okay, no shame in that. Other questions. Yeah. Has the PSCI broken its long-term trend line? Whether yes or no, what is its implication to short versus medium versus long-term investors? Actually, if you take a look at the monthly chart, guys, right now, the monthly chart, I think I showed this in the last year, where if you draw, we're actually below the uptrend line that we drew. And the uptrend line, diba nag-broken below siya last when COVID, and then it's now struggling to get back above that uptrend line. So if you ask us, that's why on a monthly chart point of view, we're not on an uptrend, definitely. And the implication there is definitely some cautious, diba? Dapat cautious. So at least for the short to medium investors, given that they want to put technical analysis into their investment style, right? So just to tell you, I'm telling you na based from that monthly chart, we're not on the uptrend. Okay, we're at that point na dapat mag 7.6 tayo, 7.8 for that line, for the PSI to be back above that uptrend line. So we're not there yet. We're far from there. So yeah, for in terms of outlook on nickel stocks, besides the effect naman ng higher commodity prices for nickel alone, the growth prospect is there in terms of its use case. Kasi yung use case in nickel is more on sa electric vehicle, which is, if you ask me, no doubt about it, is the future. If electric vehicle is the future, definitely nickel will ride through that hyper growth. Okay, so that's basically my outlook on nickel alone, diba? And of course that directly benefits the nickel stocks. Okay, so let me try to answer one more question. Yeah, okay, so the question is, how low do you think the index will go? Okay, for the index, it's hard to predict, no? That's why we're setting up support levels. If na break is 6.8 to 6.6, we're looking at 6,000, right? Anything's possible. If you ask me, anything's possible. I'm not gonna tell you na it's the market's gonna go up from here straight line, diba? Hindi siya. It's not that simple. We are in the middle of this global market volatility, but definitely we're on the verge of economic reopening. So there's some we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. It's just there's inflation watch, diba? May short-term impact pa yung election, and then this Ukraine-Russia thing it's far from over. So it's hard to be optimistic, but definitely we will get there. It's just that I'm not gonna tell you right now na your money will go up in the next month, right? So it's hard to tell. But the bottom line here is you must have that certain exposure, but we must have cash. We must have cash. So thank you. That's it for this afternoon. Thank you very much. This has been Royce Aguilar, Equity Research Analyst. As always, in First Metro Securities, it's hashtag your future first. So thank you.